In the year 2743, humanity had spread far beyond Earth. People lived on distant planets, built massive space stations, and worked alongside alien species. Among these aliens were the Velari, a highly advanced race known for their perfect logic and dislike of anything unpredictable. The Velari valued order above all else, and they often found humans confusing. Humans were emotional, spontaneous, and sometimes acted without clear reason. To the Velari, this behavior was chaotic and inefficient. One day, Daniel Harper, an ambassador from Earth, traveled to the Velari homeworld to discuss a cultural exchange program. He believed that if both sides could learn more about each other, it would strengthen their alliance. The Velari leaders listened carefully but made one unusual request. If humans wanted better relations, every diplomat sent to the Velari must first complete a special training course. This course, they said, would be called Understanding Human Chaos. It would teach the Velari how to deal with human unpredictability. Daniel agreed to the idea, though he wasn't sure how to make it work. When he returned to Earth, he knew he needed someone smart and creative to design the course. That's when he thought of Claire Bennett, a young anthropologist from New Chicago. Claire had spent years studying ancient human cultures, but she had never worked on something like this before. Daniel explained the situation to her and asked if she would take on the challenge. At first, Claire felt overwhelmed. She didn't think she was the right person for such an important task. But after some thought, she decided to give it a try. Claire began by gathering information. She read books about human psychology, history, and even art. She realized that humans were complicated creatures. They laughed when they were happy, cried when they were sad, and sometimes did things that didn't seem to make sense at all. For example, why did people risk their lives to save strangers? Why did they fight wars over ideas instead of just solving problems logically? These questions fascinated Claire, but they also worried her. How could she explain such things to the Velari? To help her, Claire teamed up with Alex Carter, a linguist who specialized in communicating with alien species. Together, they started creating lessons. They included stories from Earth's past, like battles fought for freedom and acts of kindness that changed lives. They also added examples from everyday life, like how families celebrated holidays or how friends supported each other during hard times. Despite their efforts, Claire still felt something was missing. She wanted the course to show the Velari not just what humans did, but why they did it. As months passed, the deadline for the program approached. The Velari were sending their first group of students to Earth soon, and Claire knew she had to get everything ready. She worked long hours, testing different ideas and revising her lessons. Sometimes she doubted herself. Would the Velari understand? Would they even care? But deep down, she hoped that through this course, they might see humans in a new light, not as chaotic beings to be avoided, but as complex individuals capable of great things. Little did Claire know, this project would change more than just the way the Velari saw humans. It would also change how humans saw themselves, and perhaps bring two very different worlds closer together than anyone had imagined. Claire Bennett stood in front of a large screen, staring at the faces of the Velari students who would soon arrive on Earth. She felt a mix of excitement and dread. The lessons she had prepared were thorough, but she couldn't shake the feeling that they might not be enough. Alex Carter walked into the room, carrying a stack of papers filled with notes. "You ready for this?" he asked, though his tone suggested he wasn't entirely sure himself. "As ready as I'll ever be," Claire replied with a weak smile. She glanced at the clock on the wall. In just 3 days, the Velari would land, and her job would begin. Until now, everything had been theoretical, ideas on paper, lessons planned out in neat outlines. But soon, she'd have to face real aliens, beings who saw the world in ways humans could barely imagine. Would they even care about what she had to say? When the day finally came, Claire and Alex waited at the landing site. A sleek silver ship descended from the sky, its surface glinting like polished metal. The craft touched down gently, and a ramp extended outward. Out stepped Zinfar, the leader of the group. He was tall, with shimmering silver skin and piercing golden eyes. Behind him followed 6 other Velari, each equally imposing yet eerily calm. Their movements were precise, almost mechanical, and their expressions revealed nothing. Claire stepped forward to greet them. "Welcome to Earth," she said, trying to sound confident. Her voice echoed slightly in the open space. Zinfar tilted his head, studying her as if she were a puzzle to solve. "We are here to learn," he said, his deep voice devoid of emotion. "But we expect results." The words hung in the air, heavy and unspoken. Claire nodded, swallowing her nervousness. Over the next few days, she led the Velari through their first lessons. She started with simple concepts, like why humans laughed or told jokes. At first, the Velari seemed baffled. Lirevan, one of the quieter members of the group, raised a hand hesitantly. "Why do humans make sounds when something is not funny?" she asked, her voice soft but curious. "It's called humor," Claire explained. "It helps us connect with each other and feel less stressed." She showed them videos of comedians performing stand-up routines, hoping to illustrate her point. But instead of laughing, the Velari stared blankly. Zinfar frowned. "This seems inefficient," he remarked. "Why waste energy on meaningless noise?" Claire sighed inwardly. It was clear that explaining human behavior wouldn't be easy. Still, she pressed on. The next lesson focused on emotions, how humans felt joy, sadness, anger, and love. To demonstrate, she played clips of famous speeches, heartfelt reunions, and scenes of people crying during weddings or funerals. Again, the Velari struggled to understand. "Why do you allow such instability?" Zinfar asked. "Emotions disrupt logic." Alex jumped in, trying to help. "Emotions aren't just disruptions," he said. "They're part of what makes us human. They drive us to create, to explore, to care for others." But the Velari didn't seem convinced. If anything, they looked more skeptical than ever. Frustrated but determined, Claire decided to try a different approach. Lectures weren't working, so she needed to show them real-life examples. She arranged for the group to visit a bustling city market. The Velari stepped cautiously into the noisy, crowded streets, their sharp eyes scanning everything around them. Merchants shouted prices, children ran past laughing, and musicians played lively tunes. For the Velari, it was overwhelming. "This is unbearable," Zinfar muttered, covering his ears. But Lirevan stayed quiet, watching intently. She noticed a street artist painting vibrant pictures on a canvas. Intrigued, she approached him and asked what he was doing. The artist, a man named Mia Rodriguez, smiled warmly. "I'm creating art," he said. "It's my way of expressing myself." Lirevan tilted her head, fascinated. "Expressing yourself? Why?" Mia chuckled. "Because it makes me happy. And maybe it'll make someone else happy too." That night, Lirevan returned to the training center with a small sketch Mia had given her. She showed it to Claire, her golden eyes glowing faintly. "I think I understand a little better now," she said softly. For the first time since the program began, Claire felt a spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, the Velari could learn to see humanity, not as chaotic and flawed, but as beautifully unpredictable. The next morning, Claire decided to take the Velari students to a small town festival. She thought it might help them see humans in a more relaxed and natural setting. The festival was held in a park filled with colorful tents, food stalls, and music. Children ran around with balloons, families sat together on picnic blankets, and performers entertained the crowd with juggling acts and magic tricks. It was lively, noisy, and full of energy. Everything the Velari usually avoided. When they arrived, Zinfar immediately frowned. "This is excessive," he said, his voice calm but tinged with irritation. The noise and movement made him uneasy, and he kept his distance from the crowd. Lirevan, however, seemed curious. She wandered closer to a group of musicians playing cheerful tunes on guitars and drums. Their music was unlike anything she had ever heard before, loud, rhythmic, and strangely captivating. Claire noticed Liraven's interest and walked over to her. "Do you like the music?" she asked. Liraven hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "It feels alive," she said slowly, searching for the right word. Claire smiled. "That's because it is. Music is one of the ways humans express their feelings. It can make us happy, sad, or even nostalgic." Liraven tilted her head, thinking about this. "Nostalgic?" she repeated. Claire explained that nostalgia was a feeling of longing for the past, often triggered by certain sounds, smells, or memories. To demonstrate, she pointed to an older man sitting nearby, tapping his foot to the music. His eyes were closed, and a faint smile played on his lips. "He's probably remembering something good from his younger days," Claire said. Liraven watched him silently, her expression thoughtful. Later, Claire led the group to a tent where local artists displayed their work. Paintings, sculptures, and handmade crafts covered every surface. Liraven stopped in front of a large mural painted by Mia Rodriguez, the same artist she had met at the market. The painting depicted a stormy ocean with waves crashing against a rocky shore. In the distance, a tiny lighthouse stood firm, its light cutting through the darkness. "What does this mean?" Liraven asked, turning to Claire. "It's about hope," Claire replied. "Even in the middle of chaos, there's always something to guide us." Liraven stared at the painting for a long time, her golden eyes reflecting the vibrant colors. She didn't say anything, but Claire could tell it had struck a chord with her. Meanwhile, Zinthar remained aloof, observing everything from a distance. He found the entire scene chaotic and illogical. Why would humans gather in such large numbers just to eat, listen to noise, and look at pictures? It made no sense to him. But as he watched Liraven interact with the humans, he began to notice something unusual. She wasn't just observing. She was participating. She asked questions, listened carefully, and even tried sketching a simple drawing under Mia's guidance. By the end of the day, the group returned to the training center. Claire gathered everyone in the main hall to discuss their experiences. Most of the Velari remained quiet, but Liraven surprised everyone by speaking up. "I think I understand now why humans value chaos," she said softly. "It gives them freedom to create, to feel, to connect. It may not always be logical, but it is meaningful." Her words hung in the air, and for the first time, Zinthar didn't dismiss her opinion outright. Instead, he looked at her with a hint of curiosity. Perhaps, he thought, there was more to learn here than he had initially believed. As the days passed, Claire continued to expose the Velari to different aspects of human life. They visited schools, hospitals, and community centers, witnessing acts of kindness, teamwork, and resilience. Slowly but surely, cracks began to form in the Velari's rigid worldview. They still didn't fully understand humanity, but they were starting to see that chaos wasn't just a weakness. It was also a source of strength. For Claire, these small victories gave her hope. Teaching the Velari wasn't easy, but it was worth it. Every question they asked, every moment of understanding they showed, brought her one step closer to proving that humanity's unpredictability was its greatest gift. As the weeks went by, Claire noticed a subtle shift in the Velari students. They were still reserved and analytical, but there were moments when their curiosity seemed to outweigh their skepticism. Liraven, in particular, had become more engaged. She spent her free time sketching images inspired by what she saw during their outings. Her drawings weren't perfect. They lacked the precision the Velari usually valued, but they captured something deeper: emotion. One afternoon, Claire decided to take the group to a live theater performance. It was a small production of an ancient Earth play called Romeo and Juliet *. The story of two young lovers torn apart by conflict between their families wasn't just dramatic. It was filled with raw human emotions: love, anger, grief, and hope. Claire hoped the Velari would find meaning in its themes. When they arrived at the theater, Zinthar crossed his arms, clearly unimpressed by the simple wooden stage and modest set design. "This is primitive," he muttered under his breath. But Laravan leaned forward slightly, her golden eyes fixed on the actors as they took their places. The lights dimmed, and the play began. At first, the Velari struggled to follow the story. The language was poetic and unfamiliar, and the actors' exaggerated expressions confused them. But as the plot unfolded, something changed. When Romeo mourned over Juliet's lifeless body, tears streaming down his face, even Zinthar's rigid posture softened. He didn't fully understand why the character felt such pain, but he couldn't deny its intensity. After the performance, Claire invited the group to discuss what they had seen. For once, Zinthar spoke first. "Why do humans create stories like this?" he asked. "The outcome is tragic. Why not write something logical?" Claire smiled faintly. "Because sometimes tragedy teaches us about life, about love, loss, and how fragile everything can be." She glanced at Laravan, who had been unusually quiet. "What did you think?" she asked gently. Laravan hesitated before speaking. "I thought it was beautiful," she admitted. "Even though it ended badly, it made me feel things I've never felt before." "Is that why humans tell stories? To share feelings?" "Yes," Claire replied. "Stories help us connect. They remind us we're not alone, even when life feels overwhelming." That night, back at the training center, Laravan stayed up late working on a new drawing. This time, she tried to capture the essence of the play, a swirl of colors representing love and sorrow intertwined. When she showed it to Claire the next morning, Claire was amazed. "This is incredible," she said sincerely. "You've really understood the heart of the story." Encouraged by Laravan's progress, Claire introduced another hands-on activity, cooking. She invited the Velari to join her in preparing a traditional Earth meal. At first, they were hesitant. Cooking involved imprecise measurements and unpredictable outcomes, two things the Velari disliked. But as they chopped vegetables, stirred sauces, and sampled spices, they began to relax. Even Zinthar cracked a small smile when he accidentally burned a piece of toast, and everyone laughed. During the meal, Alex shared a personal story about his childhood. He talked about growing up in a big family, where dinner was always loud and messy, but also full of love. The Velari listened intently, their usual stoic expressions giving way to curiosity. When Alex finished, Laravan asked, "Do all humans have families like yours?" "Not all," Alex replied. "But most people want connection. Family, friends. It's how we survive, how we keep going." These moments of connection grew more frequent as the program continued. One day, while visiting a park, the group encountered a group of children playing tag. The kids ran around laughing, their shouts echoing through the trees. Without thinking, Laravan joined in, chasing after one of the children with a shy smile. The others watched in stunned silence as she played, her movements awkward but sincere. By now, it was clear that the Velari were changing, not drastically, but enough to notice. They still valued logic and order, but they were beginning to see the value in chaos too. For Claire, this realization was both rewarding and humbling. Teaching the Velari hadn't just been about explaining humanity, it had been about showing them its beauty. And for the first time, Claire allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she was succeeding. Things were going well, but tensions began to rise back on the Velari homeworld. High-ranking officials had been monitoring the progress of their students through regular reports sent by Zinthar. At first, they tolerated the program, believing it would quickly demonstrate humanity's inefficiencies. But as time passed, they grew uneasy. The Velari leaders saw their envoys becoming too interested in human culture, too accepting of chaos. They feared this exposure was weakening their disciplined way of life. One evening, Zinthar received an urgent message from his superiors. He listened silently as they expressed their concerns and issued a stern warning. If concrete results couldn't be shown soon, the program would be terminated immediately. When the transmission ended, Zinthar stood motionless for a moment, his golden eyes reflecting a mix of frustration and doubt. He didn't fully understand humans yet, but he also didn't want to abandon the lessons he'd started to learn. The situation worsened when a diplomatic incident occurred. A Velari delegate visiting Earth accused a human merchant of stealing a valuable artifact during a trade negotiation. The merchant denied the accusation, insisting he had done nothing wrong. Both sides refused to back down, and tempers flared. News of the conflict spread quickly, threatening to undo all the progress Claire and her team had made. Claire knew she had to act fast. She reached out to Daniel Harper, the ambassador who had originally proposed the cultural exchange program. Together, they decided to mediate the dispute using principles from the training course. Instead of relying solely on logic and evidence, they focused on understanding emotions and perspectives. They invited both parties to sit down and talk openly about how the situation had affected them. At first, the meeting was tense. The Velari delegate spoke in sharp, clipped tones, while the human merchant raised his voice in frustration. But slowly, with Claire guiding the conversation, things began to shift. She asked each side to explain not just what happened, but how they felt about it. The Velari delegate admitted he felt disrespected, while the merchant said he felt unfairly judged. By the end of the session, both parties agreed to resolve the issue peacefully, acknowledging that misunderstandings could happen even with good intentions. Zinthar watched the mediation closely, his expression unreadable. Afterward, he approached Claire. "This method, it is strange," he said cautiously, "but I see its value. Emotions may cloud judgment, but they also reveal truth." Encouraged by this small victory, Claire organized a follow-up lesson for the entire group. This time, she focused on empathy, the ability to understand and share the feelings of others. She used the recent incident as an example, explaining how listening and compassion could bridge gaps between different species. Laravan listened intently, her gaze thoughtful. "If we can feel what others feel," she said softly, "then maybe we can find common ground." Despite these breakthroughs, challenges remained. Some members of the Velari group still struggled to grasp human behavior. One student, Kellner, remained skeptical, often questioning whether chaos was truly worth understanding. "Humans are unpredictable," he argued during one discussion. "How can you trust someone who acts without reason?" Claire acknowledged his concern. "Humans aren't perfect," she admitted. "We make mistakes, sometimes big ones. But our unpredictability also allows us to adapt, to grow, and to care deeply for one another. It's what makes us resilient." Kellinor didn't respond right away, but later that day, he approached Claire privately. "I do not understand your kind," he confessed, "but I am trying." His words, though hesitant, showed a willingness to keep learning. As the program neared its halfway point, Claire reflected on how far everyone had come. The Velari were no longer just observing. They were participating, questioning, and even experimenting with human customs. Zinthar had begun asking more thoughtful questions, while Liravan continued to explore art, creating pieces that blended Velari precision with human emotion. Even Kelnor, despite his doubts, was making an effort to engage. For Claire, these changes were proof that the program was working, not perfectly, but enough to matter. Teaching the Velari wasn't easy, and there were still moments of frustration. But every step forward reminded her why she had taken on this challenge in the first place. Humanity's chaos might seem messy and confusing to outsiders, but it was also beautiful, complex, and full of potential. And perhaps, just perhaps, the Velari were starting to see that too. The turning point came unexpectedly, during a routine trip to a coastal city. Claire had planned the outing to give the Velari students a chance to experience Earth's natural beauty. The group stood on a cliff overlooking the ocean, watching waves crash against jagged rocks below. The wind carried the salty scent of the sea, and seagulls cried overhead. It was a scene that felt alive with energy. untamed, and unpredictable. Zinthar stared at the horizon, his expression unreadable. "This chaos," he said finally, gesturing toward the restless water. "It never stops moving. Why does it not tire itself out?" Claire smiled faintly. "The ocean is like life," she explained. "It keeps going because it has to. Even when it seems wild or destructive, it's also creating something new, like the way waves shape the shore." Lyravan stepped closer to the edge, her golden eyes wide with wonder. "It's beautiful," she murmured, "but also frightening." She turned to Claire. "Do humans feel this way about life? That it is both wonderful and scary?" "Yes," Claire replied. "Life is full of risks and uncertainties, but that's what makes it meaningful. If everything were predictable, it wouldn't be as special." Later that day, disaster struck. A sudden storm rolled in, bringing heavy rain and strong winds. The group hurried back to their transport shuttle, but before they could leave, an emergency alert sounded. A nearby fishing boat had been caught in the storm, and its crew was stranded in rough waters. Human rescue teams sprang into action, battling the elements to save the sailors. The Velari watched from a safe distance, their sharp eyes tracking every move. Zinthar frowned. "Why do they risk their lives for strangers?" he asked. "It is inefficient." "It's who we are," Alex answered simply. "Humans help each other, even when it's dangerous. We don't always think about efficiency. We act because it feels right." As the rescue unfolded, Lyravan couldn't look away. She saw the determination on the rescuers' faces, the way they worked together despite the chaos around them. When the stranded sailors were finally brought to safety, cheers erupted from the crowd gathered on shore. Tears streamed down some people's faces, while others hugged one another in relief. That night, back at the training center, the Velari students sat in silence. None of them spoke for a long time. Finally, Zinthar broke the quiet. "Today, I saw something I cannot explain," he admitted. "Your kind acts without calculation, without guarantees, and yet it achieves results." Claire nodded. "Sometimes logic isn't enough. Instinct, teamwork, and courage, they're just as important." Inspired by the day's events, Claire introduced a new exercise, storytelling. Each Velari student was encouraged to share a personal memory or experience inspired by what they'd learned. At first, they hesitated, unsure of how to begin, but gradually, they opened up. Lyravan went first. Her voice trembled slightly as she described losing her twin brother to illness when she was young. "I buried my pain deep inside," she confessed. "I thought it made me weak. But now I see that grief connects us, to those we've lost, and to those still here." Her words stunned the room. Even Kellner, usually so skeptical, looked moved. When it was his turn, he shared a story about failing a critical mission early in his career. "I thought failure defined me," he said. "But today, watching your people face danger without fear, I realize there is strength in trying again." Zinthar took the longest to speak. When he finally did, his voice was steady but filled with emotion. "I have always believed chaos was a flaw," he began. "But perhaps it is also a gift, a force that drives growth, connection, and resilience." By the end of the session, the atmosphere in the room had shifted. The Velari weren't just learning about humans anymore. They were reflecting on themselves. For the first time, they saw chaos not as something to avoid, but as something to embrace. For Claire, this moment was a victory. Teaching the Velari hadn't been easy, but it was clear that progress had been made. Their rigid views were softening, replaced by a deeper understanding of humanity and of themselves. As she watched the students leave the room, she felt a sense of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this program could change not only the Velari but the future of galactic relations as well. The Velari students were nearing the end of their training, but Claire knew there was one final lesson she wanted to share. It was something she had been thinking about for weeks: the power of human creativity. She believed that art, Music and storytelling weren't just hobbies or pastimes. They were ways for humans to process emotions, express ideas, and connect with others. To bring this lesson to life, she organized a special evening event at a local theater. When the group arrived, they found the stage set up with easels, musical instruments, and writing materials. Claire explained that tonight, everyone, including the Valari, would create something. It doesn't have to be perfect, she said gently. Just try to express how you feel. At first, the Valari hesitated. Zinthar crossed his arms, clearly uncomfortable with the idea. Kelnor frowned, muttering something about inefficiency. But Laraven stepped forward, her golden eyes bright with curiosity. She picked up a paintbrush and dipped it into a pot of blue paint. Slowly, tentatively, she began to move the brush across the canvas. Others followed her lead. Kelnor chose a drum and started tapping out rhythms, while another student experimented with writing words in both English and Valari script. Even Zinthar eventually joined in, using precise lines to sketch geometric shapes on paper. The room filled with soft sounds, brushes scraping against canvas, fingers plucking guitar strings, and pens scratching on paper. Claire walked around, offering encouragement. When she reached Laraven, she noticed the painting taking shape. Swirling blues and greens blended together, forming what looked like an ocean under a stormy sky. In the center was a single bright streak of yellow, cutting through the chaos. "What does this mean?" Claire asked softly. "It's hope," Laraven replied. "Even in the darkest moments, there is always light." Her voice was steady, but there was a warmth in her words that hadn't been there before. By the end of the night, the room was transformed. Paintings hung on the walls, poems lay scattered on tables, and melodies lingered in the air. For the first time, the Valari seemed fully immersed in the experience. They weren't just observing humanity, they were participating in it. The next morning, Claire gathered the group to reflect on the activity. One by one, they shared their thoughts. Kelnor spoke first, holding up a small clay sculpture he had made. "I tried to capture balance," he said, "but I realized balance isn't always perfect. Sometimes it's messy, but still strong." Zinthar nodded in agreement. He held up his drawing of interlocking shapes. "Order can exist within chaos," he admitted. "Perhaps we do not need to fear it as much as we thought." Laraven showed her painting last. As she explained its meaning, her voice grew stronger. "Humans are like this picture," she said. "You face storms, but you keep moving forward. You find beauty even in struggle. That is what I admire most about your kind." Her words resonated deeply with the group. For the first time, the Valari truly understood, not just intellectually, but emotionally, why humans valued chaos. It wasn't a flaw or a weakness. It was a source of strength, creativity, and connection. As the program drew to a close, Claire prepared the students for their final task, presenting what they had learned to the Valari Council. This would be their chance to prove that understanding human chaos was worthwhile. Claire worked closely with each student, helping them craft speeches and presentations that reflected their personal growth. On the day of the presentation, the atmosphere was tense. The Valari Council members sat in silence, their expressions unreadable. Xanthar spoke first, delivering a calm but passionate explanation of how humans balance logic with emotion. Laraven followed, sharing her artwork and describing how it symbolized hope and resilience. Even Kelnor stepped up, admitting that he had underestimated humanity's ability to adapt and thrive. When the presentations ended, the council deliberated quietly. Finally, the head counselor stood and addressed the group. "You have shown us something unexpected," he said. "Perhaps chaos is not our enemy, but a teacher." For Claire, those words were a triumph. The program had succeeded not only in teaching the Valari about humans, but also in bridging the gap between two very different worlds. As the students prepared to return home, she felt a deep sense of pride and hope. The future of galactic relations might still be uncertain, but now it felt a little brighter. The day of departure arrived, and the air at the training center was filled with a mix of excitement and sadness. The Valari students had packed their belongings and were ready to return home, but there was a sense that things had changed. For them, and for Claire. As they gathered in the main hall for one last meeting, no one spoke right away. It was Zinthar who broke the silence. "I did not expect this," he said, his deep voice steady but tinged with emotion. "I came here believing humans were chaotic and inefficient, but now, I see that your chaos is what makes you strong. It allows you to adapt, to create, to care for one another." His words hung in the air, and Liraven stepped forward, holding her painting of the stormy ocean. She turned to Claire and Alex, her golden eyes glowing faintly. "Thank you," she said softly. "You have taught us more than we came to learn. You have shown us how to feel again." Claire felt a lump rise in her throat. She had worked tirelessly to make this program a success, but hearing these words made it all worth it. She smiled warmly. "You've come so far," she told them. "And you've taught us something too, that even those who value order can find beauty in unpredictability." Before leaving, the Valari presented Claire with a gift. It was a small sculpture created by Kelnor during their creative evening. The piece combined sharp geometric lines with flowing curves, symbolizing the balance between order and chaos. "This is our understanding," Kelnor explained, "a reminder of what we have learned from you." As the Valari boarded their ship, Claire and Alex stood outside, watching the sleek silver vessel rise into the sky. Neither spoke until it disappeared from view. Finally, Alex let out a long breath. "Do you think it worked?" he asked. "I think so," Claire replied. "We may never know for sure, but I believe we've planted a seed. Something shifted for them, and maybe for us too." In the weeks that followed, news spread across Earth about the success of the program. Other alien species began requesting similar courses, eager to understand humanity's unique perspective. Daniel Harper praised Claire's efforts, calling the initiative a turning point in galactic diplomacy. But for Claire, the real reward wasn't recognition. It was knowing she had made a difference. One afternoon, as Claire sorted through materials from the program, she received an unexpected message. It was from Liraven. Using her newly acquired skills in human communication, Liraven had sent a simple note. "I am teaching others what I learned. They listen. Thank you." Accompanying the message was a digital copy of her painting, now displayed in a gallery on the Valari homeworld. Tears welled up in Claire's eyes as she read the message. She realized that the impact of the program went beyond just the students. It was spreading like ripples in water. Inspired, she decided to expand her work. With Alex's help, she began developing new courses tailored to different alien cultures, each designed to bridge gaps and foster mutual understanding. Months later, reports started coming in from the Valari homeworld. The Council had implemented changes based on the lessons learned during the program. While they still valued logic and precision, they had begun incorporating elements of creativity and empathy into their society. Art galleries featuring collaborative works between humans and Valari opened, drawing crowds from both species. Diplomatic relations improved, leading to joint projects in science, technology, and culture. For Claire, this marked the beginning of a new chapter. She traveled to other planets, sharing her insights and learning from others. Along the way, she met former students like Liraven, who had become cultural ambassadors promoting peace and cooperation. Each encounter reinforced her belief that understanding didn't have to mean agreement. It meant seeing the world through someone else's eyes. Years passed, and the legacy of understanding human chaos grew stronger. What had started as a single program became a movement, shaping the future of intergalactic relations. Humanity's unpredictability, once seen as a flaw, was now celebrated as its greatest strength. And Claire, she continued teaching, always reminding her students of one simple truth. In a universe full of differences, connection starts with curiosity. And sometimes, the most beautiful discoveries come from embracing the unknown.